This afternoon, I want to make a series of points relating to the failure to proceed with the proposed station at Bean Park in my constituency. Now, this station is essential for a number of reasons. Firstly, to successfully complete the Bean Park housing development and wider regeneration across South Havering and Barking and Dagenham. It remains key to unlocking other housing schemes along the A1306 eastwards towards Rainham and westwards towards Dagenham, an area forming part of London's largest opportunity area. The station is central to making a success of these possibilities. Second, it's essential to make good on countless promises made over many years to local residents who've bought homes there and fear their homes are now fast depreciating. They feel they've been deceived. Third, in following through with commitments made to the wider community who've accepted new housing on the basis of promised new infrastructure. They too feel let down and angry. But there is also a wider national issue here regarding the so-called levelling up agenda. If the government is serious about imposing housing targets on local authorities, then they must accept and support the infrastructure and services to go with them, especially when for years they've been promised to residents in order to secure their consent for these plans. In this sense, Bean Park Station is an example of how not to do regenerate communities, of how to maximise cynicism and anger in local communities as people feel manipulated and exploited by the planning system. So it's a story of promises made, then subsequently withdrawn once the consent has been secured. And I say to the Minister, unless this situation is resolved, I fear there will be long-lasting effects that will inhibit future economic development and undermine community support for future regeneration. So the stakes are pretty high locally. By way of background, the London Borough of Havering, a Conservative borough, has historically been the prime mover behind the planned Bean Park Station. It then secured wider support. The detailed project came via the Housing Zone programme devised by the present Prime Minister when he served as Mayor of London. Under Mayor Johnson's programme, London boroughs could seek housing zone status and funding based on bids that would commit to increasing housing outputs beyond that which would otherwise be delivered. The funding was primarily for infrastructure projects or land remediation that would facilitate large-scale housing development. That was always the purpose of the station, to secure greater housing units. Havering worked up a bid to the GLA as far back as 2013 to bring about the development of Bean Park Station. The bid was approved by Havering Council's Cabinet in August 2014, driven through by the then Housing Cabinet member Damien Wright, the present council leader. In June 2015, Havering secured housing zone status and funding for Bean Park development programme, one of only 4 agreed at the time. It was a flagship policy for the then Mayor Johnson. Mayor Johnson said at the time, and I quote, "Housing zones will provide swift delivery for new homes for Londoners that are so desperately needed and create entirely new, highly connected urban districts." In December 2015, Havering and the GLA entered into agreement for 9.6 million of housing zone funding to cover station design and initial construction of the site. Havering then funded the Governance for Railway Investment Projects process through a contract with Network Rail. Standard documents from Network Rail were then reviewed by the GLA's internal and external legal advisors. In 2020, the GLA agreed to invest some 32.75 million to construct Bean Park Station, stating, I quote, "GLA and Countryside, the developer, are working closely with Network Rail to progress plans for the station." It was a done deal, or at least it appeared to be, signed off by the Conservative Mayor, the Conservative Council, developers, and having secured the backing of the Conservative government. Or so we were all led to believe. For example, by the way, Network Rail was involved in progressing the project throughout the process. Network Rail was a willing partner. The Network Rail route utilisation plan from July 2020 describes Bean Park as, I quote, "a committed scheme." Once operational, the station was to be transferred to the franchise operator C2C to have ongoing responsibility for the station. once again, C2C was a willing partner. Everyone realises that without additional infrastructure, the existing C2C stations will creak under the pressure of an expanding population. Over the years, I've worked with C2C to alleviate congestion at the Rainham station. It will literally not cope with thousands more commuters and could well become unsafe at peak times. So the new station...
Can I commend the honourable gentleman on raising this issue before the House today, and as a fellow Havering MP endorse everything he said about the benefits to having the new Bean Park railway station installed and the commitment that was given. Will he agree with me that the benefits to our economy, to the environment, for jobs, lower crime, and all the things that areas like ours need today as an Essex area but part of Greater London, surely we should benefit from this as well. To take this away would, in fact, be a betrayal of the people, not just of Rainham and South Hornchurch, but the whole of the London Borough of Havering.
I completely agree, and I'm glad he's agreed with me in terms of what I've said to date. I'm not sure he's going to totally agree with all of the comments that I subsequently make, but I take on board the importance of having a cross-party support for this project, and hopefully this can be rectified, the problems that we're experiencing since the back end of last year. And hopefully the government will support the GLA, the local boroughs in terms of Havering and Barking and Dagenham in getting this back on the railway. So I welcome the support going forward in terms of the commitment, not just to my constituents, but across the London Borough of Havering. As I say, C2C was a willing partner, and everyone realises the pressure on the C2C line could be immense without the three stations at Bean Park, Dagenham Dock and Rainham to remove the congestion. Indeed, in the original C2C franchise agreement before the pandemic struck, and actually published on the DFT website, it states, the franchise shall provide all reasonable assistance and cooperation to the Secretary of State and any other parties responsible or involved with the development of a new station at Bean Park. So far, so good. And on the basis of these commitments, local residents accepted extraordinary levels of housing development across South Havering and the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham. We are talking tens of thousands of new units against a backdrop of austerity and service cuts because of the promised infrastructure.
The point he makes is absolutely right, because people have invested a lot of their own money in purchasing new properties. They're buying homes in this area on the basis that they believe there'd be transport links into central London for their jobs and for other purposes. Surely to then take this away after they have committed to buying a home and decided to live there, surely that's going to really disrupt people's lives, and it simply isn't fair to the people that have made that commitment to live in that area, knowing that there's going to be a station and that's going to be taken away.
Totally. Once again, I totally agree with what the member has said, and I'm glad so far we're in agreement about the state of affairs and the need for it to be rectified, not least because the Bean Park development alone is for 3,200 housing units for 13,000 new residents through a countryside, London and Quadrant partnership agreement. Yet the scheme was always conditional on a new station at Bean Park being provided. Indeed, a Grampian clause means development cannot progress past phase 3 unless the station is delivered. To date, 1,150 homes on phases 1 and 2 are in construction, or completed or sold. Other local housing developments are also dependent on the station. Developers actually continue to market the properties, literally this afternoon, on the billboards all down the old A13 on the back of a new station, stating and promising that there will be 20 minutes journey time into Fenchurch Street. However, late last year, everything changed. The DFT issued letters to the GLA and C2C in August 2021 stating that the department is not supportive of the development of a new station at Bean Park. In a letter to me, the Minister of State said, "It is not that the department withdrew support or funding for the development of the station, but that support was never given in the first place." This announcement blindsided developers and the wider private sector, along with both the GLA and the local authority. The station is an advanced and fully costed project. GLA officers have been working with Havering, Network Rail, C2C, TfL for years. There's a collective desire to see the station brought into service as soon as possible. Detailed designs are in place and construction was due to commence last autumn. The construction of the station will be funded by the GLA. All required funding has been secured. The GLA has also agreed to provide the DfT with an indemnity for the first 10 years to protect against any operational deficit. Now, in a general sense, I think we can all agree that it's critical that infrastructure is provided, which allows land to be developed to its full potential. And Bean Park is an excellent example of this. As well as unlocking over 13,000 homes for over 13,000 residents, the station will form a civic heart for Bean Park, acting as a catalyst for the regeneration of the surrounding area, which has high levels of deprivation. The new station will also bring environmental benefits by encouraging a shift away from car use and supporting reduction in parking. The housing projects unlocked by the station will invest over £1 billion into the local area, delivering 2 new primary schools, a 3-hectare park, community and health centres, and over 60,000 square foot of commercial space, directly creating hundreds of new jobs. All this and more, unfortunately, is now threatened. And let me spell this out quite simply. Since the DfT announcement, private sector enthusiasm for local regeneration has spun into reverse. Already, local CPOs have been withdrawn. They were dependent on the infrastructure. The business model for the whole area has been thrown into question. Community anger is intense. New residents feel their property values are in freefall, as mentioned by the member opposite. Long-term, residents feel manipulated by the local authority with false promises of an infrastructural uplift. Local anger is palpable and totally understandable. Within a few weeks, thousands have signed local petitions seeking to get the government to change its mind. For the government's own housing and levelling up agenda, this decision is a disaster. It's draining support for new housing in a key national priority area for regeneration. Now, I've met with Countryside. They are very supportive of efforts to restore the station project. They've commissioned Grant Thornton to assess the social and economic impact and wider benefits of the project. I've written to ministers, spoken with the GLA's Deputy Mayor for Housing, Tom Copley, who shared his correspondence with the ministers calling for this station to be allowed the go-ahead. The basis of the government's withdrawal of support appears to centre on the indemnity that the GLA has offered to the DfT, as the DfT are not actually contributing any funding to the capital cost of the station. The GLA has offered £10 million to cover a 10-year period, whereas DfT appear to want an unlimited figure for an unlimited period. But to be honest, my real concerns are local residents. New residents on Bean Park are angry, feeling they've been sold homes on false perspectives. Many are now seeking legal redress. The government decision undermines the strategic authority and the role of the strategic authority in Havering, who at best have been shown to be negligent and poorly managed. It is an appalling state of affairs when the then mayor and council can agree the project.
I have agreed with him up till now in most of what he said. What I would gently say to the honourable gentleman, who we have a good working relationship with as neighbouring constituency MPs, that everyone benefits from this, and what it needs is not to be politicised, for it to be cooperation, collaboration between the government, the Mayor of London, Transport for London, and also Havering Council. People's lives are going to be disrupted if this station isn't built, so I would urge him to work collaboratively on a non-political basis to find a solution so that this station can be built and people can live in that community and have the transport links that they need.
I generally agree in the need for cross-party collaboration, and I hope we can work with the Department of Transport to resolve this in collaboration with the local authorities, both in Havering and Barking and Dagenham, and the GLA. But I simply say we also have to understand why we've got to the present situation, where the then mayor and the council can agree the project, assume their own government and Network Rail back them, and then only years later, due to a lack of due diligence, discover that they do not and claim to have never done so, with terrible collateral consequences for local residents. Now, I don't want to twist the knife. I agree with the member opposite and make party political points here. But the reality is that this dreadful situation has consequences for thousands of my constituents and will likely derail hundreds of millions of pounds of investment in my area. So I am angry and frustrated at the reckless decision-making at the heart of this project. It is, I repeat, an appalling state of affairs, yet it is not too late to resolve the situation. Not least because I'm sure that there are intergovernment tensions around this decision, not least given the government's stated housing objectives. Should the government not change its mind or allow the station to proceed, the future phases of Bean Park and other housing schemes in the area will be in doubt, as planning consents are dependent on there being a station. There will probably be need for new planning applications to both Havering and Barking and Dagenham councils. There will be escalating anger and opposition to new housing development. Both new and long-term residents feel they've been played and betrayed. Meanwhile, government policy appears slightly out of sync. We see the government mounting pressure on local authorities to increase housing targets, yet simultaneously pulling the plug on the infrastructure needed to support both new and existing communities in their priority areas. Now, I'm told that Havering Council has instructed lawyers to consider a judicial review against the DfT decision to legally challenge their own government, which is quite a state of affairs. Meanwhile, they're trying to blame everyone apart from themselves for this debacle. So this afternoon, I urge the government to sit down with the GLA and resolve this indemnity issue and fast-track the station. It's not too late. The Tory levelling up agenda sounds... The soundbite is all well and good, but actions speak louder than words. Either through negligence or indifference, those in power have reneged on promises of meaningful investment. Their failure to deliver Bean Park risks growth grinding to a halt across the south of my constituency. So therefore, I urgently urge the government to rethink their plans for Bean Park Station. And thank you very much indeed, Mrs. Rees.